There is a town in the Rocky Mountains tucked into a valley so narrow that the sun only reaches the streets for a few hours each day in winter. It has one of the highest per capita incomes of any zip code in the United States. Its median home price as of 2024 sits above $7 million. And yet, if you walk its streets on a Tuesday morning in late spring or a slow afternoon in October, you will find something that no amount of money can actually explain. You will find almost no one. Aspen, Colorado. Population 7,004. But that number is a kind of lie, because the people who are supposed to live here, the people who technically do live here on paper, aren't here most of the time. This is a town built for the ultra-wealthy, curated for their pleasure, preserved for their occasional use. And the people who actually keep it alive, the ones who make the coffee, teach the children, fix the pipes, run the lifts, most of them can't afford to live within 30 miles of it. This is the story of Aspen. Not the brochure version, not the powder days and celebrity sightings and après-ski rosé version. The real one, the one hiding underneath all that money and altitude and perfect snow. Before we talk about what Aspen has become, you need to understand what it demands from you the moment you arrive. At 8,000 feet, your blood changes. Oxygen thins. Your heart works harder for the same result. First-time visitors often feel it as a dull headache behind the eyes, a faint nausea, a sense that the world has been turned down slightly. Colors a little too bright, sounds a little too sharp. The mountain doesn't care how much money you have. It doesn't care that you flew in on a private jet to the Sardi Field Airport, one of the busiest private aviation facilities in the entire world. It doesn't care about your portfolio or your connections or the hotel suite that costs $3,000 a night. The altitude asks one question: can you adapt? And that question, that simple, democratic, geological question, is one of the few things about this place that hasn't been monetized. The town sits at the end of a single two-lane highway, Colorado Route 82, threading through the Roaring Fork Valley. For much of winter, that road is the only way in or out unless you're flying. There's no interstate. There's no bypass. There's just the mountain and the valley and the road that winds through both. To get here, you have to want to be here. That's always been true, even 150 years ago, when the people who came were not billionaires but miners, not seeking beauty, but silver. In 1879, prospectors flooded into the valley following the discovery of silver ore in the surrounding mountains. Within a decade, Aspen had become one of the largest cities in Colorado, not a ski resort, not a cultural sanctuary, but a raw working mining city with a population of over 12,000 people, a thriving red light district, 3 newspapers, and an opera house that attracted performers from New York and Chicago. The Wheeler Opera House still stands. Built in 1889 by silver magnate Jerome B. Wheeler, it was for a brief, dazzling moment the cultural heart of the Rocky Mountain West. But silver doesn't last forever. In 1893, the United States federal government repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, an economic policy decision made in Washington, D.C., thousands of miles away, and overnight, the price of silver collapsed. The mines shut. The people left. The opera house went dark. By 1930, Aspen's population had fallen to fewer than 700 people. Almost all the grand Victorian homes stood empty. The streets that had once hummed with the energy of a boomtown fell into a decades-long quiet. For 20 years, almost nothing happened here. And then, in 1945, a Chicago industrialist named Walter Paepke arrived Pape wasn't a miner. He was the head of Container Corporation of America, a man who dealt in ideas as much as cardboard. And what he saw in Aspen's abandoned grandeur wasn't a failed mining town, he saw a canvas. Paki had a vision, genuinely utopian, genuinely radical for its time, of a place where the physical and the intellectual and the spiritual could exist together, where business leaders and philosophers and artists might come to think, to recover, to become more fully human. He founded the Aspen Institute in 1950. The same year, he organized a celebration of the 200th birthday of Goethe that drew Albert Schweitzer to the Rockies, one of the only times the humanitarian ever visited the United States. He also built a ski area. That combination, high culture and outdoor recreation, philosophy and powder, was deliberate. Pape wanted Aspen to be something the world had never quite seen, a place that elevated both the body and the mind. For a brief window, he almost pulled it off. Through the 1950s and 60s, Aspen attracted a peculiar mix: intellectuals and ski bums, artists and athletes, trust fund rebels and genuinely countercultural voices. Hunter S. Thompson, the gonzo journalist, the man who would write Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, lived here for years. He ran for sheriff of Pitkin County in 1970 on the Freak Power ticket, shaving his head so he could refer to his opponent as my long-haired opponent. He lost by less than 500 votes. That detail matters, because it tells you something about what Aspen once was, a place genuinely weird enough, genuinely open enough, that a candidate like Thompson could come within striking distance of winning. The 1970s and 80s changed things, slowly at first, then all at once. As ski culture mainstreamed and commercial aviation made mountain towns more accessible, Aspen's real estate values began to climb. The ski area expanded. The hotels got better. The restaurants got more expensive. And then came the inflection point that no one could reverse. Aspen became definitively a place for the very rich. By the 1990s, the transformation was complete. The ski bums were priced out. The working artists couldn't afford studios. The middle-class families who had built the town's civic infrastructure started leaving, one by one, as their mortgages became impossible and their rents doubled and then doubled again. What replaced them was something beautiful and hollow. By 2024, the average household net worth of a full-time Aspen resident had crossed $10 million. The town consistently ranks among the wealthiest communities in the entire country, not just in Colorado, not just in the West, but in America. The price of a ski pass on the mountain, $229 for a single day. The price of a lift ticket in 1965, adjusted for inflation, roughly $12. Let me tell you about the other Aspen, the one that exists 30 miles down the valley. Because here's the thing no one in the brochures mentions: Aspen doesn't work without people. It needs ski instructors and housekeepers and restaurant servers and nurses and teachers and electricians. It needs people to operate the gondolas, plow the streets at 3 a.m., staff the front desks of the hotels, and almost none of those people can afford to live in Aspen. They live in Basalt, 15 miles away, in Carbondale, 25 miles, in Glenwood Springs, 45 miles. Every morning, they make a commute that, in winter, can take 2 hours each way on a single clogged road through the mountains. This is not a secret. Local officials have talked about it for years. Researchers have documented it. The Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority has been trying to address it since the 1970s, one of the earliest municipal affordable housing programs in the American West. They've built deed-restricted units, imposed income limits, tried creative ownership structures. And still, the gap keeps widening. A ski patrol officer with 15 years of experience. She grew up in Aspen, but when her parents sold their home, a modest Victorian they'd bought in the 1980s for $180,000, now worth $4 million, she couldn't stay. She commutes 80 miles a round trip 5 days a week from a trailer in Newcastle. She does it because Aspen is where she learned to ski, where her identity was formed, where she still feels in some complicated way like she belongs. A sous chef at one of the high-end restaurants on the Strip. He sleeps in a staff house, a cramped dormitory-style arrangement that the restaurant provides because otherwise no one would work there. 7 people share 2 bathrooms. He's been doing this for 3 years because the wage, even at $28 an hour, doesn't come close to covering an Aspen apartment. The cheapest available rental in Pitkin County in 2024 averaged $4,200 a month for a 1-bedroom. A schoolteacher. The Aspen School District is one of the most generously funded public school districts in Colorado because property taxes in a place like this generate extraordinary revenue. The schools have swimming pools and state-of-the-art science labs. The teacher drives 40 minutes each way from Basalt every day because that's where she found something remotely affordable. She teaches children whose parents arrive to pick them up in vehicles that cost more than her annual salary. This is the quiet tension at the heart of Aspen. The people who actually make daily life function are being systematically excluded from the community they serve, and everyone knows it, and the structural forces that cause it have proven, decade after decade, nearly impossible to reverse. Here is a number that explains almost everything. According to data compiled by the Pitkin County Assessor's Office, approximately 45% of residential properties in the city of Aspen are occupied for fewer than 6 weeks per year. Nearly half the town is a vacation home, a second home, an investment vehicle with a guest bath and a ski locker. The owners come for Christmas week, maybe Thanksgiving. They come for the Food and Wine Classic in June, which in its peak years drew celebrity chefs and 10,000 attendees who collectively spent millions of dollars in a single weekend. They come for the X Games, held on the mountain every January, which brings an entirely different demographic, younger, louder, neon-jacketed. And then they leave, and the town sits, impossibly beautiful, functionally empty. This is not unique to Aspen. It's a pattern playing out in ski towns across the American West, in Jackson Hole, in Vail, in Telluride, in Park City. But Aspen is the most extreme version, the place where this phenomenon reached its logical, almost parodic conclusion. When a town becomes an asset class, when the houses become investment portfolios rather than homes, something fundamental changes about what a community even is. Who governs? Who votes in local elections? Who cares about the quality of the public library, the condition of the roads, the programs at the community center, when half the residents aren't actually there to use any of it? The people who care most about Aspen's civic life are often the ones who can least afford to live there. The long-time residents, the families who've been there for generations, the workers who drive in from the valley every morning. These are the people showing up to city council meetings, arguing about zoning, volunteering on committees. The owners of the $10 million empty houses are rarely in the room. Aspen is not one place. It is 4 different places that happen to occupy the same geography. Winter is the identity everyone knows. December through March, the mountain opens, and the town fills with a particular kind of energy that's hard to describe unless you've stood at the base of Ajax, Aspen Mountain, on a bluebird powder morning and watched people streaming toward the gondola, faces flushed, breath visible, moving with the contained excitement of people who are about to do something they love deeply. Aspen Mountain's vertical drop is 3,267 feet. The summit sits at 11,212 feet. On a clear day, you can see 100 miles in every direction, mountains and valleys folding away to the horizon like a topographic map come to life. The skiing here is genuinely extraordinary. This isn't a marketing claim. The terrain is serious, double blacks that would humble experienced skiers from anywhere in the world, long-groomed runs that let you breathe and find rhythm, glades and chutes and bowls for those who know what they're doing. Aspen has 4 separate mountains: Aspen Mountain, Aspen Highlands, Buttermilk, Snowmass, with a combined 5,527 acres of skiable terrain. Spring is the town's best-kept secret, and its most honest moment. The crowds leave, the prices drop. The restaurants that were fully booked in January now have open tables. The streets quiet. A different kind of person emerges, the locals, the ones who stayed, the ones who have always loved this place for reasons that have nothing to do with being seen. They hike the muddy trails. They sit on the deck of the Hotel Jerome with a beer that actually costs a normal amount. They breathe. Summer is an identity the town has been deliberately cultivating for decades. The Aspen Music Festival, founded in 1949, 1 year before the Aspen Institute, brings classical musicians from around the world for 9 weeks every summer. Students and faculty perform in a tent pavilion with some of the finest acoustic design of any outdoor venue in America. On any given Tuesday night in July, you can sit on the grass outside the tent for free and listen to a full orchestral performance under a sky busy with stars. That is the Aspen that Walter Paikey dreamed of. That one still exists, in summer, free to anyone who shows up. Fall is the town's most photogenic season and its most melancholy. The aspen trees, the trees that gave the town its name, Populus tremuloides, the quaking aspen, turn gold. Not orange, not amber, but a pure, saturated, almost unnatural gold that seems to generate its own light. The groves flicker and shimmer in the mountain wind. The sound they make, thousands of small round leaves trembling against each other, is unlike anything else in nature. And then the leaves fall, and the crowds haven't arrived yet, and Aspen in October is a ghost of itself, beautiful, quiet, faintly sad, as if the mountain is exhaling. The Aspen Institute still exists. This is worth pausing on. In a town that has, in many ways, abandoned Walter Paik's democratic vision, the institution he built continues to convene. As its website describes it, the most important conversations of our time. World leaders, CEOs, Nobel laureates, former heads of state. They come to Aspen, sit in seminar rooms, wrestle with questions about democracy and technology and the environment and the future of human civilization. The Aspen Ideas Festival, held each summer, draws names that would fill a newspaper's front page. There is something genuinely valuable in what the Institute does. The conversations are real. The intellectual ambition is real. And yet, there is something almost too convenient about it. The way high-minded discourse about inequality and democracy and opportunity happens in one of the most economically segregated places in the United States. The people discussing the wealth gap in America are staying in hotels that cost $800 a night. The people serving them dinner drove 45 minutes to get here. This isn't an indictment of the Institute. Ideas matter. Conversation matters. The people who attend these events are, by and large, trying to make the world better. But it is a tension that the town never quite resolves. Aspen wants to be taken seriously as a place of ideas and culture. And it genuinely is, in measurable ways, the music festival, the institute, the art galleries, the Wheeler Opera House programming. The per capita investment in cultural infrastructure is extraordinary, and yet the structural reality of who gets to actually live here makes certain ideas feel like they're being discussed in a particularly gilded echo chamber. There is a problem that money cannot fix. Not yet, anyway. Aspen's entire economic ecosystem depends on snow, the town's identity, its economy, its culture. Everything traces back to the fact that mountains get cold and precipitation falls and powder accumulates on slopes designed for sliding. But the snowpack in the Rocky Mountains is changing. Since 1980, the average snow season in the American West has shortened by nearly 3 weeks. Average annual snowfall in the Aspen region has declined measurably over the past 3 decades. The springs are arriving earlier. The warm seasons are growing longer. The ski industry has responded with snowmaking. Aspen Mountain now has the infrastructure to cover most of its lower slopes artificially when nature doesn't cooperate. The energy cost of snowmaking is significant, the water cost is substantial, but it buys time. What it doesn't buy is altitude. The mountain still goes to 11,000 feet. The upper elevations still get cold enough for natural snow for now, but climate projections for the Colorado Rockies suggest that by 2050, many ski areas at lower elevations may struggle to maintain viable ski seasons. Aspen is one of the higher ones. It has more runway than most. But the anxiety is present in the town, carried quietly by the people who've been here long enough to remember what winters used to look like. He's worked on the mountain for 28 years. He remembers years when the base had 6 feet of snow by Thanksgiving. He remembers the mid-90s, which were extraordinary, storm after storm, one of the great decades in Aspen skiing history. He says it's harder to explain to young patrollers now what those winters were like. They don't have the reference point. He doesn't think the mountain is dying, but he worries about it. We talk about preserving this place for future generations, he says, but future generations might not have the winters we had. The question that haunts Aspen, the one that comes up in every conversation about housing and economics and what the town is for, is the most fundamental question any community can ask itself. Who belongs here? The long-time locals, the families who've been in the Roaring Fork Valley for generations, the ranchers and miners' descendants, the people who remember Aspen before it became famous, they have a particular kind of claim. They built this place. They stayed when it was nothing. Their presence gives the town its historical continuity. The workers, the people who keep the economy running, who teach the children and fix the pipes and make the beds in the luxury hotels, they have a claim too. A working community has to include the people who make work possible. The wealthy property owners, the people who spent $7 or $10 or $20 million to own a piece of this mountain, they have a claim as well. They fund the tax base. They create demand that employs thousands of people across the valley. Whatever ambivalence one might feel about concentrated wealth, the economic activity it generates is real. And then there are the seasonal visitors, the ones who come for a week at Christmas, who fall in love with the place, who feel genuinely that Aspen is their spiritual home, even if they've never voted in a local election. All of these groups claim Aspen. Most of them are right, and they all want something slightly different from it. The tension never fully resolves. It just shifts and adjusts and finds new expressions. Right now, the wealthiest voices are loudest. Not because they shout, but because the market itself amplifies their preferences. When property values determine who stays and who goes, the market is doing the talking. The question is whether a community can consciously decide to protect something beyond what the market values. Can it choose, deliberately, to maintain a mix of people, a range of income levels, a diversity of experience, even when economic forces are pushing relentlessly toward homogeneity? The Aspen Housing Authority has been trying to answer that question for 50 years. Some would say they've had modest success. Others would say the problem has simply outrun every solution. Here is the thing that the critics and the economists and the housing advocates, including me, in everything I've said so far, can sometimes forget. Aspen does something to people, not to the people who own it, necessarily, not to the abstraction of the wealthy as a category, but to the person who stands at the top of the mountain on a morning in January when the light is golden and the air is cold, and there are 12 inches of fresh powder, and below you lies a run that will take 12 minutes to descend, and you feel in your body a kind of pure animal competence that doesn't require explanation or justification. In that moment, something real happens. The mountains do what mountains have always done to humans. They make you feel simultaneously very small and very alive. That combination is rare. It doesn't care about your net worth, and the town, despite everything, has maintained pockets of genuine communal life. The farmers' market on Saturday mornings where locals shop, the free concerts in the park, the high school football games where the kids of billionaires play alongside the kids of ski instructors because at 16, you're just a kid with a ball. The trails that surround the town, hundreds of miles of them, are public. They don't cost anything. In summer, you can hike to the top of a 14,000-foot peak and share the summit with anyone who made it up. The mountains are not for sale. And perhaps that's the most honest thing you can say about Aspen. The best thing about it, the mountains, the sky, the air, the physical exhilaration of being alive in a landscape this extreme and this beautiful, that thing cannot be owned. You can own the house with the view. You can't own the view. Aspen is a mirror, not a flattering one. Not the kind you hang in a hotel lobby where the lighting is designed to make everyone look slightly better than they actually do. More like the unvarnished kind, the one in a back bathroom that shows you exactly who you are. What it reflects back is a particular American story, the relentless conversion of beauty into commodity, of community into product, of place into brand. It shows us what happens when a town becomes so desirable that the desire itself becomes destructive. But it also reflects something else. It reflects the genuine human longing for places of beauty. The need, not a luxury, a need for physical environments that ask something of you, that require your body to work, that put you in the presence of something larger than yourself. People are not wrong to want this. The longing that drives a family to book an expensive week in a mountain town is the same longing that has sent humans to mountains forever. The need to feel, briefly, like the world is bigger than our problems. Aspen has monetized that longing, but it didn't invent it. Walter Paker's dream was not crazy. It was, in fact, beautiful. The idea that a place of physical splendor could also be a place of intellectual seriousness, that the body and the mind could be elevated together, that beauty and thought were not in opposition. The dream didn't fail. It was outrun by economics, by the relentless upward pressure of desirability, by the fact that things which are beautiful tend to become expensive, and things which become expensive tend to become exclusive, and things which become exclusive tend to lose the very quality that made them beautiful in the first place. The question Aspen raises is not unique to Aspen. It's being asked in cities around the world, in neighborhoods that gentrify, in coastal towns that price out their fishermen, in wine regions that become theme parks of themselves. What do we owe the places we love? What do we owe the people who keep them alive? How do we hold something beautiful without crushing it? There are no clean answers. The best communities are the ones still asking the questions honestly, without pretending the tensions don't exist. Aspen will survive. The mountain will see to that. As long as snow falls and the valley is beautiful and humans need to feel small in the presence of something large, people will come here. The real question is not whether Aspen survives, it's what it becomes, what it's willing to protect, who it decides belongs, and whether, in the middle of all that money and beauty and altitude and ambition, something of Walter Pake's original hope might still be possible. A place that asks, what is all of this for? A place still trying, imperfectly, to answer.